Okay, so a very good morning, everyone. I'll be talking on aesthetic approaches to the orbital tumors. And when we talk about orbital tumors, in oncology in general, we have life salvage, eye salvage, and then vision and cosmesis. But according to the patient, fortunately, unfortunately, their preference is always about cosmesis. So we have to take care of everything along with keeping in mind the patient's preference. So when we talk about orbital tumors, how do we really approach it? We approach it by assessing what are the differential diagnoses at clinical presentation, what is the location of the tumor, where exactly it is placed, what are the adjacent structures, what are the possible logical approaches for the tumor based on its location, and what are the possible outcomes. For this, we need to do a thorough clinical examination, radiological assessment, meticulous surgery, followed by histopathological confirmation. And without any of these components, we are not able to approach the orbital tumors correctly. So the orbital surgical approach is basically a transconjunctival, anterior, lateral, and combined approach. Now we have various presentations that occur around us. If you can see this patient, this is a patient presenting clinically with a bluish discoloration over the left lower eyelid, and then there is radiological evidence that there is a mass in the orbit. So we have to keep that in mind. What could this be? Any guesses? It's a venolymphatic malformation or an orbital varix, if you have to say, but then those are the two differentials. Again, a patient over here who present clinically pretty much with just mild fullness on the upper eyelid, and as you can see, a proptosis on the right side, there is inferior scleral show. So of course, we are looking for a tumor on the right side. And then when we look into the orbit, there's a retrobulbar lesion, that's why it was going into axial proptosis. And then we have a lesion which is probably right above the optic nerve, if I'm not wrong. Right? So we need other sections as well. Another child presenting with an orbital mass or like superior orbital fullness, and when you see there is a mass in the orbit. But CT scan was done over here because sometimes it's difficult to keep these children under MRI. And again, another patient, this is a patient of eosinophilic granuloma actually, and we did an incisional biopsy, and after which the defect started healing up, and post-operatively the child did pretty well. Another example over here, there's a superior orbital mass right here. When you have a superior orbital mass in a child, what would be the first few differential diagnoses that you would keep in mind? Correct. Okay, one. Painless, rapidly progressive. Okay, and what else? Before RMS, what would we think of? Like say in this patient, you see there's a mild redness component here. We can actually even think of an orbital cellulitis to begin with, right? But again, we do a CT or an MRI, and then we see that there is a lesion right there. That means that we're not looking at just inflammation. But it could be again orbital inflammatory, NSOID or non-specific orbital inflammatory disease as well. Another patient over here, clinically nothing is seen, absolutely perfect, no defect whatsoever. Vision is also retained, what do you do? But there's a little bit of stretching sensation that the patient can complain of sometimes, and this was a patient with a cavernous hemangioma in the apex. And this patient was treated well with radiotherapy and did pretty well. And another patient over here, you always have to worry about these lesions specifically because you're looking at the superior orbit involvement or the roof erosion. When you're looking at roof erosion, that means you have to have neurosurgery involvement as well along with you. This is a patient that was treated by Picibanil. As I said, this is a VLM and was treated very well with Picibanil and responded in an excellent way. Nowadays, we have venolymphatic malformations which can be treated with sclerotherapy, or we can say aspiration and then bleomycin. And this is where we have done aspiration followed by insertion of bleomycin, and the patient does pretty well in these cases as well. We have to keep in mind where exactly the lesion will be present. And the lesion basically, as you can see over here, could be intraconal. This is a spectrum of dermoid, right? So, of solitary fibrous tumor. It could be intraconal, it could be intraconal with an extraconal extension, or it could be extraconal or diffuse, or with EOM involvement, or with an optic nerve involvement over here. So why is it relevant? When we have such a spectrum, we have to look at how you're going to plan it surgically. So every single thing matters. Every single surgical step matters when we are looking at the location, as you can see over here. Another thing, what surgical approach do we take? These are the different incisions that we take for orbital tumors. Stellarderite is the most preferred, or the modified stellarderite, where you get a gentle wing at the end, at the lateral end. That is modified stellarderite. We have Benedict lesion, which hides pretty well in the brow, and then you have modified Harris and modified Harris, which blends again with the upper lid crease. Sometimes you also have to go inferior lesions by subciliary approach, or Davis approach can be used in patients who have eye bags. So it's easier that when there are festoons, you actually can go inferiorly as well. You have Berkeries, and you have Lynch and Gullwing incisions as well. But again, the transconjunctival world, we have Goldberg incision, limbal incision, and transconjunctival approach. So just to show you an example, as you can see over here, we are tagging the superior rectus initially, and then orbicularis is dissected with the modified stellarderite incision. After that, we take relaxing incisions, and the periosteum is separated. When you separate the periosteum out, you do a bone cut to make sure that you have better access to the tumor, and that was marginotomy that was done. And then the lesion is excised with cryo assistance, and this was a patient with a cavernous hemangioma. You can or cannot do periosteal closure, it's up to you, but I prefer sometimes that if we get the periosteal if we get the periosteum stitched up, then it kind of gives a better access in future. So this is a patient again with an orbital dermoid, and that was excised completely by like an external approach. Again, another patient with an external approach. Now, what about transconjunctival approaches? When you take a lateral canthotomy and cantholysis, and you take the inferior fornix all the way, and then you expose the periosteum, take a periosteal incision, separate and dissect the periosteum. And again, the cryo-assisted delivery, very easy over here. And then you can do close the canthotomy, and that's how you are taken care of. So again, this approach is beneficial. Why? There is no incision, there is no scar whatsoever. Patients don't even develop symblepharon because you do a very neat job. Try to do a buried suture so that you're not really exposing the conjunctival suture. And they actually prefer we prefer these approaches because they're aesthetically sound, and these are all the patients which were treated of cavernous hemangioma, and there is a transconjunctival approach. Even in the large tumors, as you can see over here, it can be used. In orbitotomy in general, there can be certain transient complications like ptosis, ocular motility restriction, visual loss, and diplopia. These are the possible complications, but these can be taken care of. As you can see, the ptosis could be corrected, and even later the strabismus can be corrected. Visual loss and diplopia, of course, are two things which cannot be really taken care of later, so you have to think about it preoperatively. I always prefer to do a video recording of the consent from the patient. I make sure that I inform them about the possible complications, even if I know that I will do a great job, fine, whatever, but I would still tell them I prefer to under promise and over deliver. So I always give them all possible complications. Patients actually ask, ma'am, is this even required? Do I even need to undergo surgery? And that's okay. But if we don't tell them, then it's a really big problem. Especially in cases where the lesion is abutting the optic nerve, please inform them about the possibility of visual loss. And again, we go further. As you can see, these patients did pretty well. So to conclude, cosmesis plays a very important role despite the possible malignant nature of the tumor, directly associated with psychosocial aspect. Radiological confirmation is mandatory. A meticulous planning of the surgery, especially by transconjunctival inferior fornicial approach, leads to minimal complications and gratifying outcomes. Always remember, histopathology plays a very important role, and confirmation guides us regarding adjuvant treatment. Whether or not you want to give further chemotherapy or radiotherapy, a lot of it is decided by the histopathologist, the pathologist. And again, the margins should be clear. So if you have any orbital lesion in which you can take the lesion out along with the capsule, always prefer to do that. Otherwise, if you have to take an incision biopsy, then make sure that you send multiple layers so that you can get a better analysis. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Nupur.